Hi everyone, Jamie Humphries here for Six String Alliance, and welcome to another video where today we have an incredibly special guest. Yes, another guest joining me on the channel. This person is someone that I've known for more than 20 years and has had a massive impact on my career and my guitar playing. He is without a doubt one of the most influential guitar players to emerge from the 1980s, as well as being one of the original guitar players on the Shrapnel Records label. He's also worked with the likes of Alice Cooper and has been a member of UFO for pretty much 20 years now. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you all to Vinnie Moore. Hey, Vinnie, how you doing?
Hey, how are you, man? Thanks for the kind words. It's great to be on your show. And the Jamie Humphries Show. Favorite theme song and everything.
That's good. It's good. It's good to be creative, Vinnie. I'll have to use that in future shows. It's been a long time since I've seen you.
I know. I'm thinking back to the point where we first met. And yeah, when was that? Like around 2000, 2001?
I think we first met when we did that Guitar Techniques thing at Phil's house.
Right.
I think that was about 99, 2000. And then obviously at that time you were still with Music Man, and then we were doing the guitar shows and the guitar clinics and stuff and gigs together, and lots of fun, lots of funny memories, lots of laughs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
definitely good memories, and wow, time has surely flown by.
It
does.
Yeah, it has. So how have you been? What have you, I always ask this, but coming out of COVID and pandemic and all of that crap, what have you been up to? What have you been doing? How have you kept busy?
I've been working on a new record, and I'm just about finished with the mixes. In fact, everything is mixed, and I just need to kind of go back and re-listen to everything as one full entity, as a full record, and decide if I think anything needs any tweaks or whatever. But the record is pretty much finished, and I plan to put that out in the next few months. And that's occupied most of my time, actually. I've been in the studio recording and not doing any live shows like everybody else.
So I want to talk more about your career and your solo career in my list of questions, but just talking whilst discussing a new album. So do you do everything yourself at home, or where are the drums and the bass done? Are they done elsewhere?
No, I don't usually do drums at home. I'm not equipped for that. I mean, I have the space, but not the expertise or the amount of microphones and compressors you need. So I let somebody else do that. And I had my friend Richie Monica go up to Parcheesi Studios up on Long Island, New York, with a guy named Bob Stander. And they knocked the drums out in a couple days. And I get all the files here. And then I start laying down guitars. And I have bass player friends do things in their studios and send me those files.
Yeah.
So it sort of comes together that way.
Oh, cool. So are you still a Cubase user?
Yeah, I think I have Cubase 10.5. I didn't want to move up to the latest version in the middle of a project.
Yeah.
I never like to take a chance like that. So, I'll probably upgrade to the latest version soon, but 10.5 has been great.
Yeah, I see that they're just about to release. I'm on 11, I think, or 11.5 maybe. I think they've got something else.
One louder.
Yeah, it is. But I think they've got Cubase 12 coming out at some point.
Okay, I'll just wait for that one then, I guess.
Yeah. So let's do a little bit of a retrospective, because you've had a very, very long career. I remember reading about you in guitar magazines when I was still doing my paper round. How did it all start for you? When did you first pick up the guitar?
I was always into rock bands before I played. I loved music in general, listening to the radio and getting my own albums. And I gravitated towards rock, of course. And so it was the Beatles, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Queen, Elton John, Peter Frampton, all those typical kind of bands that were around when I was growing up. And one year, I needed to decide on what Santa Claus was going to bring me for Christmas. And I ended up going through a catalog and seeing a guitar. And for some reason, I was fascinated with the guitar. And I thought, I'll have that. I would like to get a guitar. And so I got one for Christmas. And, it didn't take very long before I caught the bug, and I just became obsessed with it and just started, taking lessons and learning and listening to music, just practicing all the time. And that was it. The spell was set on me, was cast.
So in those formative years, what kind of artists were you listening to? What guitar players inspired you back then?
Well, it was Blackmore, Page, George Harrison, Peter Frampton. And then, I started playing guitar, and then 6 months later, I heard an ad on the radio for Jeff Beck. He was coming to Philadelphia, and they were playing some of his music in the background. And I thought, oh, that sounds really interesting. And so I bought the Wired record, and Jeff became a huge influence on my playing. Just amazing player and such a big influence. And over the years, it became players like Al Di Meola, Larry Carlton, Robin Trower. I say Al Di Meola, Hendrix. There's just so many players out there doing different things, and there's so much to learn from and steal from. And that's, pretty much what I did. And I started taking lessons with a local guy who was a really good player. He was rock, but studying jazz stuff with Pat Martino, who lived just like 30 miles north of us. So, he told me about jazz, and I started listening to guys like Joe Pass and Pat Martino, and horn players, and that opened up a whole new world. And just kept trying to take in everything I could.
Something that's always kind of not puzzled me. Well, that's probably the wrong word. But I find interesting in how you get to that point, because when I was learning to play, I'm a little bit younger than you, not much younger, but a little bit younger. And obviously, when I was in my teenage years, I was listening to you. And
I feel bad for you. I'm sorry about that.
But, I was listening to you, and I was listening to Jason Becker. Obviously, we all listened to Van Halen. And I listened to...
Yeah, that was the guy I forgot to mention, actually. He was a huge influence on me, too.
But I grew up listening to Shrapnel Records. And so that was, although that's not very apparent in the way that I play, but it definitely inspired me. How did you develop that technique and that sound? Because you were one of the kind of iconic guitar players associated with the neoclassical style of guitar.
Oh, thank you. I really don't know, man. I just played a lot, practiced a lot. I studied as much as I could. There were guys like Di Meola with the fast picking, and you hear that, in high school, and I go, wow. I see him live and think I'll never be able to come anywhere near doing that thing, to that level. But I just kept working on it. So he helped with the right hand, and then I'd hear Holdsworth with the left hand. Like, I'll never be able to do that, which I still can't, but it influenced my left hand a lot. And then there were guys like Larry Carlton for phrasing, and Beck for phrasing, and little quirky little things. And I was just taking in things from everybody and just trying to push it, practicing a lot, and push it to the next level.
But what about composition? When you were coming up with the compositions that had that very strong classical sort of element to them, where did that come from?
Well, when I started, I had a little cheap mono cassette tape recorder, and I was learning scales, and I was trying to learn how to improvise. So I'd always put down chord progressions. And when I put down a chord progression, I'd usually put an A and a B part for whatever reason. That was my typical structure. So I always had a change in there. And sometimes the parts were only 2 chord parts, but I'd play with the cassette and just improvise using scales. And that's how I learned how to improvise. Mm-hmm. And also learning other people's solos helped. But the classical stuff, I think for me, it came from Blackmore. And I remember Blackmore saying he was really into Beethoven and Bach and stuff like that. So I went out and bought some albums because I thought, if Richie likes it, I got to hear this stuff. And really, even some of Di Meola's stuff, the harmonic minor stuff, even though it was fusiony and you couldn't say it was classical, I mean, it had some of those kind of elements in it. So I just kind of went off in a little bit of that direction too. And, I was never taught how to write songs. I just sat down with a 4-track recorder. And like I said, it started from my ideas, which I just recorded so I could learn to improvise over. And then I started structuring them more and more. And you listen to like classical music and you hear like some typical chord progressions like da, 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 da. So you start using them and you hear more and more and you just like start laying them down yourself in songs and playing over them and creating melodies, and it just starts to take shape.
Right. So I want to discuss that a little bit more in a moment when we move on to the question after this question.
Okay.
My next question is your big break. So
big break.
Your big break, that came from obviously meeting Mike Varney, and you
I know it happened on the baseball field. I broke my ankle, and that was the big break.
that was the first big break.
I started playing guitar even more because of that, cut out the sport. So that was the first big break.
But then your second big break was
right. Yeah. Varney had the column with Guitar Player, a spotlight for new talent. And I worked up a demo after the first thing was a failure. I tried to rent studio time and do my songs, and it just didn't come out very well. We had one night to do it, and I was very depressed at the way it came out. So that's when I bought a 4-track recorder, started recording my ideas and honing them, working on it myself at home. I got to the point where I thought I had some stuff that was decent. I sent the tape to him, and I heard back from him pretty quickly, that he liked it. He was going to feature me in the column. And we just started talking on the phone, and it kind of eventually turned into like, let's record together kind of thing.
Right. So you did the first thing that you did, though, was the Pepsi advert. Is that correct?
Right. They were in LA. It was a production company. They were doing the Pepsi commercial, and they were casting, actors and the musician for it. And they initially thought they want to get Eddie Van Halen, but I don't even know if they approached him. If they did, he didn't want to do it, but they thought they want to get someone kind of like Eddie, an Eddie type of figure. And so they bought a bunch of guitar magazines and shops and started looking at different guys. And somehow they saw me in the spotlight column and thought, hey, what about this guy? Ended up calling me. And actually, I was on the plane the next morning. It's pretty insane. Wow. They called me in the evening, and I was on a plane to LA the next day. I'd never even flown before.
Wow.
I was like 20 years old, and, it's like almost like a dream the way that happened.
So I might have got my timeline wrong. I didn't realize this, but you were part of the of Vicious Rumours as well. Was that
right?
Was that prior to your first solo album?
Yes, it was right after the Pepsi commercial. And I was talking to Varney, and this band needed a guitar player, and he wanted to record with me. So it kind of became like an obvious thought that maybe he could put these two guys together, this band and this guitar player, do a record. And so I ended up out in Santa Rosa, California, hanging with the guys and rehearsing and honing in on some of the songs. And eventually we recorded that record.
Because you had your own little instrumental piece in there, didn't you? In Invader, which sort of, I guess, was a slight sort of neoclassical nod towards Eruption in
exactly.
In some way.
Yeah. I've always been like a little bit that I had a tape of me recording that at home before I went to the studio, and it was so much better. And you go there and you're in the studio and you have like an hour or something, and you're nervous and it doesn't come out quite as well as what you can potentially do. And, there's some slop in there, but it was the best I could do on that given night.
Oh man, I was actually listening to that this afternoon. It's insane. And then you've got the cathedral style volume swells and
a friend of mine heard the cassette I did of that way back in the day. And when the record came out, he's a guitar player and a keyboardist. And even he said, your demo was a lot better than that. I'm like, yeah, I know. And I have looked for that tape and I can't find it, because I would put the file up somewhere online. But
that would be awesome to hear.
Maybe I'll stumble upon it one of these days, but it just seems to be lost, which is crazy because I hoard everything I've done.
So then following on from the Vicious Rumours album, then you obviously entered into an arrangement with Mike Varney, and you recorded Mind's Eye.
Right, exactly.
So that is seen as one of the most influential albums from that period when it comes to guitar, and especially that genre. It really is a genre-defining album.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we did that in 86, man. I was like 21 years old and just writing songs at home, and finally had enough to do a record. Flew out to San Francisco, went up to Nevada, California, where Prairie Sun Studios was located, actually Katati for that, and just started laying it down. Mike had arranged Tommy Aldrich on drums and Andy West on bass and Tony McAlpine on keyboards. And I went out and just started rehearsing with Tommy, just he and I, for like maybe 4 days, and, you know, working on the rhythms of the stuff. And then Andy eventually came in, and Tony, and we went in and cut basics, the drums, in like 3 days.
Right. And with that, so was a lot of that material obviously was developed when you went in. Did Mike have much input with those tunes, or was it pretty much your own?
He had some input, like when I was home writing, like, hey, maybe do something like this. But once we were there, my stuff was like fully prepared, and every note pretty much was written. Maybe not for all the solos, but for the song structures and the harmonies and melodies and stuff, it was pretty much written, because I was afraid I would go there and like panic and not know what to do. So I thought, if I prepare in advance, I'll just do, you know, my thing. I'll do what's written. And it worked out well.
But that was coming back to that question I said I wanted to touch on with the neoclassical kind of influence, the instrumentation, everything, the keyboard parts and the sounds. Is that, you know, again, how did that come about? Because it was, at the time, it was pretty unique. You know, the way that you kind of embraced the sound of the classical music with the instrumentation and the arrangements as well. There was a lot of imitators after that.
There was a lot of listening to that style of music, and it was just like pretty much metal, you know, with classical stuff, chord progressions. And, you know, it's funny, there were also songs on there like Shadows of Yesterday that weren't, they were thrown amidst the classically oriented stuff, but I wouldn't say they were actually in that direction. Like the ballad, which was called The Journey, wasn't very classically oriented, you know, stylistically. And there might even be a few more on there. But yeah, I mean, there was definitely a big presence for the neoclassical stuff. It just sort of happened just from listening to that stuff, hearing Demiola, hearing Blackmore.
Because moving on from there, as your albums progressed, or as you say, you know, obviously the albums weren't just strictly that thing, but that presence of neoclassical has definitely diminished a lot from your style, and your style of writing has really evolved. You know,
right. It was there a lot on the second record, Time Odyssey, but I started exploring some other territories also, like fusion-y jazz stuff, and you know, that started to kind of come out a little more. And you know, I just wanted to kind of go off in different directions and show more of what I was all about as a player and writer. And I was always exploring and trying to take in new things. And by the time I got to the Meltdown record of writing for that, I was kind of burnt out on that whole classical thing. Like I had done so much of it, and I thought it wasn't representative of, you know, what I was all about entirely. And then there was suddenly everybody was doing it, and I thought, you know, I just like kind of want to like move into a different direction a little bit. And I started just trying to put a rock band together, the vocalist. And so I started writing more rock-oriented songs, and my project didn't really take off with the vocalist, so I started writing songs for the Meltdown record. And so I continued in that rock direction, which I was really excited about. And, you know, some of the more swing-oriented influences from fusion and jazz started showing up in the rhythms of what I was writing. Some of my phrasings and the solos.
Yeah.
So I kind of went off in a different direction that way.
Yeah.
Which kind of evolved organically and naturally somehow.
That was one of the things that I remember when we hung out at Phil's place that first time that we met, and you came in and you played on that track. It was that swing. There's a lick that you showed me, and I still to this day use it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was just like this little descending kind of little sweep thing and like a little chromatic passing, but it had a real swing. And that whole, I remember that whole piece that you played. I was really blown away by how in the pocket you were with that swing, that kind of fusiony swing groove to your lines.
Thanks. I mean, I don't know why, but when I was like younger, learning to play guitar and I was taking lessons, any kind of music for me was like a learning experience. And I didn't like put up any perimeters or borders stylistically. I remember the Benny Goodman movie being on TV and it was filled with his music and playing. And I just watched that and I would hear it and think, wow, that's amazing. Listen to those phrasings. And, you know, I would try to get anything I could from any genre. You know, I didn't close things off stylistically. And, you know, at a certain point, I heard that Holdsworth listened to horn players. And so I started listening. I thought if it's good for him, I'm going to get something out of it. So I started listening more to Charlie Parker and Coltrane and stuff like that. And of course, I could nowhere be a jazz guy in any universe or play like those guys play, but you can't help but get something from it that's going to affect your playing in a positive way.
It's been very apparent, though, again today, just between jobs, I was going through your catalogue of material and just sort of refreshing my memory on stuff. And it's just really refreshing to hear your sort of growth from Mind's Eye all the way up to say, you know, your last album, Soul Shift, of the just... You can hear it's you, but stylistically, it's such a change in the orchestration and the compositions, and you know.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, you have to evolve and grow and do new things and experiment. If not, you know, if you don't grow, what are you doing? You know, it's boring to me, and I wouldn't want to play anymore if I was repeating the first couple albums over and over again. You know, it just doesn't work for me. And, you know, you change as a person over time too. And anything you record, any album or whatever is kind of a snapshot of where you are at that particular time in your life. And, you know, I'm not the same guy. You're not the same guy. We have to kind of like always take in new things and let that comes out in what you write and, you know, and you're playing in your music.
Do you think that I want to talk about some of the other projects that you've done, but do you think playing in UFO for the amount of time that you have, do you think that working with those guys, any of that has rubbed off on the way that you write your own solo material?
It could be. I really don't know. Where would I be if I never joined the band? Why would I be writing some different stuff now? Maybe. And so, yeah, it's had an influence. To what level, I'll never be able to say or determine, but you know, when I write music for the UFO records, it's always more of my rock side, of course, because that's what the band is. And I write in the spirit of the band. And, you know, everything I've done or been involved with has shaped, you know, the fabric of who I am as a player and a writer. And so definitely it's probably had a big influence on me. Right. And, it's been a good experience. And, you know, I've been in the band for like 20 years and with a bunch of English guys, and I still have the worst British accent imitation ever. So I've not progressed in that area. Blimey.
Yeah, I always enjoyed every so often you'd send me a message and be in England somewhere drinking tea and trying to be as English as you possibly could when you were over recording.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I still haven't got any sound.
You always did the best Beavis and Butthead impression, though.
I used to be really good at that. I haven't done it in a really long time, though. But
I remember that.
I was critically acclaimed.
Yeah. So talking about, we took a little bit of a jump there, but in the early 90s, you ended up working with Alice Cooper as well. Mm-hmm. So how did that come to pass?
I was in the studio doing a record called Meltdown, and I was on Relativity Records, but they were owned by Epic, Sony, so it was under the same umbrella. And Alice was on Epic Records, so we kind of were on the same label, so to speak. And his A&R guy, a guy named Bob Pfeiffer, heard we were in the studio and things were going really well. And I think it initially came about because they were Alice was doing the Hey stupid record, and he was having guest guitar players like Satriani, Vi, Slash, I forget who else. And, they asked me if I would be one of the guests on the record, which of course was a big honor. And of course I was going to say yes to that. And so it came about as me just playing a couple songs on the record. I went up to Bearsville Studios in New York, and it was like a 4-hour drive from where I lived. It's a lot of snow up there. It was cold, maybe February. And I had just finished mixing the Meltdown record in January. So I had some time off, and they had been cool enough to actually send me the songs in advance, which I was kind of surprised that they would actually do.
Yeah.
So I got to work on the stuff at home before I showed up. I was like totally blind, working blindly when I got there. So I had learned the rhythms to the songs, and I had kind of, jammed around with the solo. So I kind of had an approach as to where I was going to go with those. And we just went in the studio and did it, man. It was like a half a day of recording the 2 songs. We went out to dinner. I drove home. It was a really quick thing, but that was the start of it. And then I got a call like some months later asking if I'd be interested in doing the tour. And which was actually not an easy decision, because I had just worked like a year on the Meltdown record. It was going to be coming out. We had all these plans to go out and do a big solo tour. And for whatever reason, the record label couldn't release it until October of that year. And I had finished mixing in January. So I was like, this is crazy. And, I was very impatient, and I wanted the record to come out as soon as possible, but they couldn't do it until October. So the Cooper thing came up, and I think that started in July. So there was a window of time there. And I thought, hey, this will be great. So I'll be just kind of sitting around waiting for the record to come out anyway. And plus, they were going to tour all over America for 3 or 6 months. So it was the perfect scenario for me to have a record coming out and, be out doing press and being visible all over the country. But then somewhere in the middle of the tour of America, they kind of changed their plan and decided to go to Europe for 6 months. My record label was saying, well, if you're going to be out of the country for 6 months, it doesn't make any sense to put your record out. So we'll just hold off on it for another 6 months. And I was like, no, I just can't let that happen. I want to get my record out there so badly. And so I decided not to continue with them on the European run. And, which wasn't an easy decision, but, my path was like touring myself and getting my record out.
Yeah, because you've done some pretty high-profile tours as a solo act, haven't you? You've opened for Rush.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that came up soon after that when I went out doing shows with those guys, and that was like another amazing experience. And, I just wanted to go out there and establish myself in the touring world as a solo artist. And, I wish I could have done both, but it just wasn't possible. And I just didn't have it in me to let my record sit on a shelf for a whole year.
Yeah.
Something that I'd worked so hard on. And, so I decided I wanted to do that.
I guess being a solo artist, it's great to get the call to go and play with these big acts, but at the same time, you have your own path, you have your own thing that you put your heart and soul into. You want to get that out there.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.